In this video, our goal is to understand a little bit more about solving equations and to get a chance to see it in action. So pay close attention. The video is only as good as you make it. So if I'm asking you to pause the video and try a step, do that so that you can actually see if you understand how to do the problem. Okay? The other thing I want you to remember is there are many ways to solve an equation. So if you feel really good about solving equations, you can solve it on your own and then fast forward the video to the answer and see if you get it right. If you get it wrong, ask yourself why. Ask your teacher why. But if you simply get it wrong and move on and just copy down the right answer, it will not help you learn anything. So remember, your goal here is to learn and better understand how to solve equations. And so do it and try it and listen in and get some hints from me, because we haven't talked a ton about this in class yet. And so you haven't heard all of those hints that I have from teaching math for the last 8 years. So pay close attention and ask questions of your teacher if you get stuck during this video. So here we have an equation. I know that everyone knows the first step, which is to write down the left, the right, and then original. Now, the next step, typically as you've heard in your classes, is another step to look for is flipping. And in this case, there is some flipping to be done. So what we have to remember is the flip occurs when we have minus in front of a parenthesis, because that means that group is in the bottom. Notice on the left of the equation, there is no things that are in the bottom. We have a -6, we have 2x, and we have an x. But we can simplify. So we're going to flip and simplify, because we can do something on each side every single time. So by simplifying, I'm talking about adding the x's together to total up to 3 x's. And then we have -6. On the right, we're going to flip, and so we're going to end up flipping both of these tiles. And so the x becomes a -x, and the 5 becomes a -5 plus 3 still. So we flipped both the x and the 5. Our next step is typically to look for zeros. So these are the typical first 3 steps. You write down the problem, the original, you flip, and you find zeros. And we remove them. And again, there happens to be zeros here. On the left, there are no zeros. There's 2 different types of tiles, so I'm just going to copy it down because I can't change anything. But on the right, if I were to draw these tiles, I draw 5 negatives and 3 positives. There would be some zeros because a -1 and a +1 make a 0. The x is just going to copy down as a -x. But the -5 and the 3 make 3 zeros, leaving me with 2 negative tiles. I'm really just doing the problem. I'm simply doing the problem -5 plus 3, and I'm getting an answer of -2. That's simply all I'm doing. I'm just combining those like terms. Now, the next question, the next thing that we start to worry about, once we've gotten all the flipping and the zeros off and the simplifying done, the next thing that you typically do is you start focusing on your goal. And remember, our goal is to say x equals some number. Or maybe it's the other way around, but my goal is to have x alone and the numbers on the other side. If you notice, we have x's on both sides, and we have numbers on both sides. So let's just pick one and take care of it, okay? We're going to pick one like the x's and try and get rid of them. And put them all to one side. So I'm going to simply add an x to both sides so that I can make this a 0. So if I put an x on the left, I would have a 0 here. If I put an x on the left, I'd have 4x. On the right, I'd have the 0. On the left, I'd have 4x because I put one more on. I'd still have the -6. This one, remember, made a 0. And I'd end up with -2. So I've met a goal of getting all the x's together. That's one of the major goals for solving these equations. Now my next step is to kind of start to simplify, and hopefully you'll notice that you can remove -2 from both sides. See these negatives, they're on both sides, so I can remove -2 from both sides. I'd end up with 0 on the right, nothing's left over there. But now instead of 6 negatives, I'd only have 4 negative, and I'd still have the 4x. So I got rid of some more stuff, and that's really the goal with equations, to clean it up until you get x equals something. But at this point, I now need to focus on that other goal of getting x alone. Remember x alone. All the x's are on one side, but now I want them alone. So I see this other 4 over here that I actually want to take care of and get rid of, the -4. So to get rid of it, I'm going to make a 0 by adding 4. Because when I add 4, I get a 0 right here. When I add 4 here, I end up getting 4 on the right. And on the left, I have 4 x's. So I'm at the point where I'm at the last step here. I have all the x's together. I have all the numbers on the other side. The last step is to figure out how much 1x equals. Since I have 4 of them, 4 x's, and I want just 1, I have to split this group on the right into 4 groups because I want to see what one group looks like instead of 4. So I actually divide by 4. I divide both sides by 4 because I want 1x and I see what 1x equals. And 4 divided by 4 is 1. So the answer here is x equals 1. Again, maybe you tried to solve this equation on your own and you got the same answer. Good job. That means you probably did it right. But if you didn't do it right and you got the wrong answer, you need to go back and listen and understand what mistakes you might have made. Now let's take a look at 2 more examples. I'm going to talk a little bit less and just focus more on understanding the questions, that the equation and how to solve it. We're still going to start with our first step of writing down the original equation. Just copying it down. And we're also going to start with the second step, the same as we did on the last problem, which is to flip. We always want to look for flipping. And I know there's flipping because when I copied down the equation, I saw the minus parentheses. I also see it on the left and the right. So both of those need to get flipped. Everything else is just going to copy down. So I'm going to flip everything inside of the parentheses. The y stays, but the other stuff is going to flip and flip. You're going to flip the 4 to -4, and the minus y will flip to positive plus y. We're going to do the same thing on the right. We're going to flip anything that's in the bottom if we picture out the tiles, and the -4 tiles would be in the bottom because the minus in front, so they would flip to being +4. And everything else is staying the same. So I see a lot of stuff, and as I wrote that, I realized I could put some things together. Maybe you did that as you wrote, but the next step, I'm going to simplify. I'm going to start to simplify and combine like terms. So I see the terms y and y, so all together I have 2y, and I still have the -4. On the right, I see 4 plus 3 plus 1. I can put all those together and see that there's a total of 8, and I still have the -2y. So that was just simplifying and getting everything combined. Okay, now I start to focus on my goal. Everything's very simple. I look for things I can remove, but there's nothing in common because over here it's a negative y's, and on the left it's positive y's, positive 2y's. The 8 on the right is positive, on the left it's -4, so there's nothing I can remove. So what I'm going to do now is simply start to get the y's together. I'm going to get the y's together by, let's say I'm going to add 2 y's. Because if I add 2 y's, they would make a 0 on the right, and on the left I would have 8. I'm going to add them on the left as well, because I don't want to forget to do it to both sides. I still have the -4, but now I have 4 y's on the left. It's all about keeping it balanced, doing the same on both sides. So yay, all my y's are together, but remember your goal is to say y equals some number. So my next step is to get y alone. So I see over here the y, I want him alone. So to get him alone, I'm going to add 4. Because that will make a 0. Add 4. And you're left with 4 y's on the left, because they made a 0. And on the right, when I add 4, I'm going to get 12. So we're almost done, because remember our goal, y alone, figure out what y equals. My last step is to figure out what 1y equals, because right now I have 4. So again, thinking to your tiles, we're going to take these 12 tiles and split them up into 4 groups, because there's 4 y's here. So to do that mathematically, that's called division. So we're going to divide by 4, because I want to know what 1y equals. That will give me 1y equals 12 divided by 4, and I get 3. So my answer is 3. So, similar steps as the previous one. Sometimes there's a step I can skip because I don't need to do it. But keep your eye on the goal of getting the variable alone. Here's the final example that we'll do together. So let's start with copying down the equation. By copying it down, you start to see stuff that you're going to do right away. I realize there are parentheses on the right side. So the left, I'm just going to leave it alone because there's nothing to flip. And my first step is always to flip. So I'm going to flip both of these because they're in the minus parentheses. So I'm going to flip. So the x will flip to negative x, and the minus 2x squared is going to flip to plus 2x squared. Remember, you're drawing these in the bottom of the equation mat. We would flip them to the top. They become positive. And I still have the 8. So I flipped. I want to check for simplifying or for zeros. I see nothing to simplify because there's no like terms. And I don't see any zeros, again, because there's no like terms. But let's take a look at what I can remove. Do you see stuff on both sides you can remove? You can remove 2x squareds from both sides. They're both on each side, so let's take them off, because that'll keep the equation balanced. Everything else just copies down. Much simpler equation. We just remove something. Now I look, is there anything else I can remove? Let's see, there's x's, but there's negative on the other side. There's negative 4 on one side, but positive 8 on the other. There are no more like terms to remove. So I have nothing else to remove, but I can add stuff on to make zeros. So I'm going to add stuff on so that I get the x's together. I always like to focus on x's first. So I think I'm going to add x so that I can make this x go away. And then I'll have x's all on the left-hand side. So I still have the minus 4, but now I have 4 x's on the left. On the right, I'm going to make a 0 with this when I add an x. And so I'm going to end up with 8 left over, because this made a 0. My next step is I got the x's together, but now I need to get the x's alone. Together and alone. So I see the x's here. I want to get them alone, so I'm going to add 4, because that will make this a 0. And it'll help the x's become alone. But whatever I do on the left, I have to do it on the right. And I'm going to end up with 12. Last but not least, we always are going to figure out what 1x equals. And the way we do that is we take this 12, and we're going to split it up into 4 groups, because we want 1x. And the process is known as dividing. So we're going to divide by 4 to see what 1x equals. And we get 3. When we 12 divided by 4. So the answer is 3 for this one as well. So those are your examples. Remember, if you solve the equation differently, it may be correct. If you get the same answer, you probably are correct. So please make sure you're asking your teacher if you're unsure if your solution was right. At this time, you get to solve the next 3 on your own. And when you're finished, you're submitting your answers for the questions at the Google form that you see here. Don't forget, you type in every single letter, symbol as you see it here. So these 3 should be capitalized. When you finish the Google form, there'll be further instructions on that form. It's simply a place where you're going to enter your answers so the teacher can check them. Okay? Don't forget to ask lots of questions if you're unsure of how to do a problem. Good luck on questions 4 to 6.